This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by WeUseCoins.com. Washington toughs and their allies pushing Americans' patience to the brink. Fortunately, physical retaliation is still a topic that can be a little bit academic and hypothetical. I guess that's all the more reason why we should talk about it while we still can.
No recording devices allowed of any type.
Then just turn it off.
I don't know how much longer things will be peaceful in the United States. Peaceful, such as it is. There are certain reasons why you don't use violence against the authorities. Well, I call them the Ridley reasons. And they're not the reasons you're accustomed to hearing. If they were, I wouldn't do a video about them.
You can't do that!
The typical reasons you would hear are, oh, you don't do it because you'll get hurt. Or you don't do it because the government's very powerful. It has great weapons. You'll lose. And a somewhat more reasonable objection is that it's wrong or ethically questionable. I think the best way to put it would be to say that it's ethically questionable. If an attack on government officials endangers innocence, then it's ethically wrong. If it were perfectly targeted and perfectly executed, it would still be, I think, ethically questionable. That's probably the best way to put it. But the main reasons to avoid using violence against the authorities are these reasons. Number one, it tends to make the government stronger, not weaker. Victims of guerrilla resistance are often used to propagate sympathy for government forces. Number two, violence against the authorities is not necessary to prevail over them. Academic Erica Chenoweth, a guest on Free Talk Live, has recently published a study to this effect. Her research found that nonviolent revolutions were generally more effective and successful than the violent ones. If you Google her name, you should find the videos I've done about her theories. The third reason you don't do it is because it may tend to undermine support for your movement. Reason number four, your perfect plan will never be perfectly executed. Let's take the Michael Collins example. Probably one of the least bad violent revolutions waged that I can think of was the Irish Revolution of roughly 1921. I'm not sure that revolution was the accurate or the official term for it. But anyway, the original IRA, once Eamon de Valera was thrown in jail, fell under the command of a relatively decent man by the name of Michael Collins. Collins used targeted strikes against British forces and especially informants. That was his MO, but of course, inevitably, the IRA killed plenty of innocent people even during that conflict. The British retaliation, of course, killed many more, but I don't blame the IRA for that. Reason number five comes right back to the IRA struggle of the early 20s. A violent rebellion tends to have a negative effect on what comes after. Yes, it can be done, you can win, but look what happened in I guess it would have been around 1922, 23. After more or less defeating the British, Ireland almost immediately descended into a civil war between Irish factions. The so-called Free Staters under Collins, kind of ironic they have that name, or maybe it's not. Then on the other hand, you had a more puritanical bunch or purist bunch that did not want to accept the treaty with England. Eventually that group ended up assassinating Collins, who was probably about the most the best figure to run Ireland at that time, and it just messed things up for the next 10 or 20 years to some extent. Collins and company proved that you can wage a quick and successful violent revolution against superior forces. However, they probably could have done just as well without firing a shot. Maybe better. I think better. Gandhi said that a violent revolution will lead to a violent freedom. But I say a violent revolution will lead to a violent victory followed by no freedom. So, even the most targeted type of violence should be viewed as more like a nuclear option than a helpful option. It's more useful as a deterrent than as something that actually happens. In any case, those of us on the pro-peace side of this debate, and those who think that guerrilla warfare should be used in the United States, I hope the latter of you will at least agree with me on one point. You never threaten violence. That's almost worse than using it. Then, you're the bad guy if you follow through on your threat, and people would say you're the flake if you don't. That seriously puts your ass up against the wall. Anyhow, just some thoughts as the tensions rise. There are 1,000 constructive things you can do right now, either openly or secretly, that will not physically harm a soul, but will take us closer to freedom. Do those.
Bitcoins, the world's first practical internet cash. A nightmare for governments to try and control. Inflation and counterfeit resistant. They return you some control over your money. And a new measure of anonymity. A lot cheaper to use than PayPal. You can use them to buy tax-free cigarettes. And almost anything else. I accept Bitcoins. So can you. Get started at WeUseCoins.com.